Good morning, everybody. Thank you so much for joining us. We are like right on the nick of time, so we are going to give folks a moment to come in. We have a packed audience today. We are so glad to see all of you here. Many recurring faces that we've seen before, but also lots of people that are new. So welcome to Pocketed. We are thrilled to be with you this morning or this afternoon, depending on where you are. I'm tuning in from the Lower Mainland in British Columbia. Aria, my co-founder, is also in British Columbia, but up in the Okanagan, where all I'm looking out at right now is fields of snow. So East Coasters, anyone outside of BC, we are feeling you today. I think we've got lots of people in. So I'm going to go ahead and get us started. So good morning again. Thanks all for being here. My name is Brianna Blaney. I'm the CEO and co-founder of Pocketed. And I'm so thrilled to be here with my co-founder, Dr. Aria Hahn. She is our Chief Technical Officer, and we would be lost without her. A few housekeeping items that will come up as questions inevitably. Yes, this session will be recorded, and yes, you will receive a copy of that recording after the session. We also welcome you and invite you to drop any questions that you have into, I think it was into the chat, it looks like today, or no, into the Q&A. So please drop questions into the Q&A. The chat tends to get busy, so we want to make sure that we don't miss your questions, and we will make sure that we have time toward the end of our session today to get through as many questions as we can. If we don't have a chance to get to your question today, you'll always be able to get in touch with our team. For those of you that are joining us and that are the first time ever meeting Pocketed, we built Pocketed as founders for founders and business owners to help eliminate that challenge that all of us have experienced at some point in this journey around money. I know that it's something we talk about a lot. It keeps me up at night. It's always been the number one thing as an entrepreneur in every business that I've built in the last decade that has kept me up at night. And Aria's gotten lots of 3 a.m. phone calls and texts. So I'm sure some of you can relate to that. I know from the founder groups I'm in, it's super relatable. And we're here today to talk about some of what we've learned in the last 4 years of building Pocketed, or how you can be more successful leveraging grants as part of your funding strategy. We are a software platform that have an entire suite of services that help you end-to-end with grants. So you will today receive a code to gain access to the platform. We'll share that toward the end of our session and our time together. So Aria, it's been a freaking week.
It's been a week, and it's Tuesday morning for us. Tuesday lunchtime at best on the other side of the country. But it really has been a week. This is probably like the most popular text that I'm getting from friends right now, except, fully written out here. But we don't know what's going on. It started on January 6th with Justin Trudeau announcing his resignation. Then we have Trump come in on the 20th, and it's been wild. So we've had everything from, instability and the risk and uncertainty, and those things like really eat at people. Interest rates cut. We have our dollar went down, and we've had tariffs and then no tariffs and then tariffs and then no tariffs in the end. But that wasn't clear until yesterday afternoon. So it's a lot, and it's especially, I think, hard for SMEs, small to medium-sized enterprises, where cash flow and trade, they matter so much. There's not, millions or billions sitting in the bank to weather storms. So it's a tough time. We don't have an election coming up for over a month still. So, this was just some of the headlines from the past couple of days. Like, it's not even like this is the whole year. It's unreal.
No, and it's been 5 years of unprecedented times. And Aria and I were chatting the other day, and it's like we're tired of being in unprecedented times. So, in these types of times, one of the things that we talk about a lot at Pocketed as entrepreneurs is we have to focus on what we can control. What can we actually control? Because there's so much going on, whether it's tariffs or who is running the United States of America, or even who is running Canada, that feels out of anyone's individual control. And we have to focus a lot on what can we control. And we're going to go through that today as it relates to grants, because there is so much about this ecosystem, how fast programs come, how fast they go, they're changing requirements, the delay between receiving an approval and being awarded the actual money and then getting the cash in the bank. There's so much in this landscape that we don't control. So we want to cover with you today at the end of the session the things that you can control that will absolutely position you for more success. But before we get there, we want to deliver on our promise and share with you some of the insights and data that we have that we know can help you be more successful with grants.
This is just generally true. So there's a lot of research on this statement. Past behavior is the best predictor of future behavior. It holds true from everything from your personal relationships to government spending. So we're going to focus today more on government spending than personal relationships, because that's not something, we're experts in. But it's also here to say, despite all of the uncertainty and the confusion of what's going on, we do know a couple of things in the past to be true. And so if we look even in our own lifetimes, the financial crisis in 2008, the government stepped in and implemented a $63 billion fiscal stimulus. And during COVID, which we all remember so vividly, it was $300 billion. And so in times of economic constraint and stress, the Canadian government has historically stepped in and in almost all cases had three goals: encourage growth of companies, protect jobs, and restore confidence in the government. And so what we expect here is the same thing. So if all of these things happen, tariffs happen, trade wars, who knows, these are the behaviors that we do expect from the government. So deep breaths, it's going to be okay. So at Pocketed, I come out of academia. I'm a scientist by training. We're led by the fearless Brianna here, and she's also a very data-driven person. And so she's often asking for the data. So we've been collecting a lot of data for a lot of years. And one of the problems that Pocketed really aimed to solve was that there isn't a central location for all of the funding opportunities. And so we really set out to build that, in some ways harder than we anticipated. But we got there. And so once we were there, we started saying, look, now we have actually a really rich source of data that we can and should be using. And so this is kind of the highest level overview of what's going on. Annually in Canada, there's about $5.9 billion in grants, tax credits, and other business incentives. So that's a lot of money, a lot of money. So there is opportunity here. Pocketed has over 17,000 users. So we're very proud of that, to be able to help and support Canadian businesses in that way and accessing the programs that our government really has here to support us. At any given day, or any kind of given month, this is the types of numbers that we see. So we see about 17 to 1,800 programs open on any given day across the year. The majority of those will be grants, so about 1,300. But we also see a huge amount of tax credits. And I think tax credits, at least for me, initially, I'd hear the word tax and start to kind of feel a little bit sleepy. But it turns out tax credits are actually really amazing funding tools. So they are entitlements, unlike grants. So if you qualify for them, you are entitled to that money, it makes them very important to understand as an entrepreneur. And grants, there is just so much money and so much there that you never want to forget about them either. But this is all to say there's a lot of money and there's a lot of opportunity, and it doesn't really matter when. There's just things open. And we're going to talk a little bit more about timing now and where timing does play a role. So we've been tracking when programs close on a weekly basis since 2023. And so you'll have access to this data and figures after the webinar as well. So no need to memorize any figures or charts here, the way that some of you might be. So there are lots of programs that are evergreen, we call them. So they accept applications on a rolling basis and are more or less always open. These are not included on this graph. So if it's an evergreen program, it's not on here. And of course, you want to know when there are spikes in closing, because you want to make sure that you're not missing out on these opportunities. So what we can see here is that we see 3 major peaks a year. In the spring, just before the fiscal year ends for the government, in September, so the fall there, and then at the end of the calendar year as well. So there are 3 kind of spikes, and we're seeing them start to reoccur and give us till next year. And you'll see this pattern, from 2023 all the way through 2025 to see how true it tracks. But as much as deadlines matter, open dates actually matter so much more, so much more. Because we know from the past experience for over the past few years that for many, many programs, if you get your application in when it opens or just after it opens, your chances of success are much higher. And so this is obvious for programs that are largely first come, first serve. Of course, first come, first serve, you want to get in there right away. That's very clear. But we also see this with many of our programs, and many of the government's programs. So we see this from programs like Can Export that fill up. They're so competitive and they really fill up. There's so many applications for them, and they adjudicate them, evaluate them as they come in. And so as they spend more, there's just less money. We also know that some of the super clusters, so those multi-million-dollar programs that are out there, many of them, once they award that money's gone from that funding pool. And so you want to be in sooner rather than later. And so open dates matter so much. And so learning about open dates, when programs are likely to open, and preparing your application in advance is one of the best ways to maximize your success. So what's available right now? So we look at this data every day, all day long, and we break it down into many different ways. And so we just wanted to show you kind of the balance between all the different types of non-dilutive funding. So really quick, non-dilutive funding means you get funding and you don't have to give up equity for that funding. So that would be different than VC funding or other types of financing. And so all of this is, you do not give away a piece of your company. So what we can see is that the number of open programs is dominated by grants, and the money is there too. And so as much as we like all of these other things, and we really, really do, we still encourage you to really focus on grants. But you can stack grants with other things. So you can stack grants with competitions, lots of pitch competitions, product competitions. It's been really fun. Actually, Canada Post runs a competition annually. And many of the winners of Canada Post have come into Pocketed, and it's been really fun to talk to those entrepreneurs. It's actually one of my favorite things about Pocketed is talking to so many really kick-ass entrepreneurs and talk about their experience through those competitions. There's incentives. And so sometimes, it's tax breaks or it's mentorship. So there are other kind of incentives for businesses that are out there. Loans. Everyone gets it. Everyone understands what a loan is, and loans can be essential to businesses, and very, very large businesses that are profitable and are cash flow positive. They still use loans for growth, and it's a really important thing. There are subsidies, so discounts essentially, and tax credits, tax deductions, and others. And so we have all of these types of non-dilutive funding on our platform. And so it's really important to kind of think about how you can use these different categories, higher risk profiles, more guarantees with different categories. So really understanding this landscape and how you can take advantage of the funding across it will make your company more financially successful. One of the questions we also get asked all the time is, where is there money available? And this can be really important when you're starting to set up your business and you're trying to decide, where do you incorporate your business? Like, you have this whole country. And so we've actually started to plot this. So there are many programs that are federal. So they're available across the entire country. You just have to be in Canada. But then there are also provincial funds as well that are only available to businesses within that province. So what you're looking at here is actually a heat map of dollars available by province, but it is not normalized by population. And so it might look from this figure like maybe you want to incorporate in BC, Ontario, or Quebec. But when you actually normalize this by the population there, we find that there's actually a fairly equal amount of funding across the country. And by capita, the territories actually have the most. So that is another thing to really understand about this. That said, the types of funding in each of the provinces does really, really vary. And so you'll see more agriculture funding in the prairie provinces. You'll see different types forestry funding in Quebec and BC. So there are also funds that are kind of specific to the industries that really drive those provinces, which of course makes sense. Fortune favors the fortune. This is probably one of the things that we tell entrepreneurs the most in different forms and in different ways. But there's that old saying that you need money to make money, and grants are a little bit like that as well. As your company grows and moves towards that profitability, so does the size of the opportunities that you can access. So this doesn't mean that if you're a small company, you can't get grants. You can, but it does mean that if you are at that idea stage, you're not yet incorporated, you don't have employees, you don't have a proof of concept, you're very unlikely to be successful for those multi-million-dollar grants. One of the first types of grants that we often see entrepreneurs and ventures eligible for and successful at getting are building the team. So wage subsidies and hiring grants are among the first types of funding you can get. Almost every grant in Canada, and there are exceptions to every rule, but by and large, with the tax credits and the grants in this country, you have to spend money and then you get reimbursed. So that's kind of another piece here. If you're building a prototype and you're spending money on employees and expenditures, you can likely get some of that grant funded. And if it's R&D, you're entitled to uh, a lot of that money back as a tax credit. But this is all to say that kind of as you grow, so does your opportunity. It's not linear. And we see people come in really early and they want those big grants. And we're here to say, you got to prove your venture a little bit more before the government will take a big risk on you. But that's okay, because if you look at some of the number of small programs, so less than $10,000 per grant, there's 408 open today, all, worth a ton of money. And so this means that those wage subsidies to hire students and youth, there is money out there for you. You're just probably going to want to start with those grants. As you grow, you can start to access some of those a little bit bigger ones, $25,000 grants. You probably need to be incorporated. You probably need to have some employees, not always, but generally. And then as you're doing R&D, as you're doing what we call fundable activities, we're going to talk a little bit about that too. And as you can kind of align the activities in your business with the government priorities, you can start to kind of move up that value chain. We say amount varies for programs that really don't have a cap or their cap is so large. And some of these programs will give you, thousands, and some are in the millions. And so that's where it can be a little bit difficult. But there are programs kind of across this value chain. And so as you go on your ventures business or your ventures journey, you're going to move down this chart as well. What the government is investing in today is growth. And there are a couple of areas I think that kind of jump out here where the government believes you should grow. So there's lots of types of growth in businesses, and we absolutely recognize that. But what we're seeing is a really, really big investment in commercialization and market expansion right now from the current government. We also see a lot of money in research and development. Canada continues to strive to be a hub for innovation. And so we really are seeing investment there. And kind of with the on-ramp of a lot of AI technologies that, we've all been exposed to. We could talk about DeepSeek and that controversy later. Love to do that. But we're seeing a lot of investment in training. And so training you could think of as upskilling. The government wants to make sure that as AI kind of comes through many products and many aspects of our lives, that the Canadian population is able to use those tools. And so that's where we're really seeing an investment in training as well. Finally, we also just want to say opportunity isn't created equally. So there aren't equal amount of funds for every industry and every priority. These are the top 10 that we saw in the data and that we believe will also likely be the foci of 2025. So clean energy, anything that is going to help us be greener and produce that energy, research disciplines, building infrastructure within our own country, COVID really opened up the fact that we lack some critical infrastructure as Canadians, and so to bring that onshore is been a huge priority. Supply chain, making sure we can feed our citizens, um, and then of course, the rest of the list is really worth looking at. It is focused on innovation, clean tech, and making sure that we're taking advantage of a very highly educated population that we have here in Canada. So we're in a good situation here. Lots of investment from the government and lots of trends that we anticipate will really continue into next year. With that, Brianna.
Yeah, whoa, take a breath. It's a lot of data. Aria is definitely our data communicator. So now let's talk about what this means to us in context of how can I treat grants differently, look at grants differently, approach funding differently based on what we know in the data. And we see the Q&A filling up. Thank you, folks. Please keep your questions coming in the Q&A feature, not the chat, so we don't miss it because it's getting busy already and we're excited to dive in. So let's go through some tips. First, think like an investor and diversify your non-dilutive funding strategy. Just like you want to diversify everything in your business, you don't ever want to rely in the markets on one security. You want to diversify. You want to take the same approach when you're thinking about non-dilutive funding. We talked about how there are grants, there are tax credits, there are incentives, there are loans, there are all types of government incentives, and some of them come from corporations as well. And you want to make sure that you're looking at the right composition of non-dilutive funding in your strategy. Grants have a huge role to play, but they're very forward-looking, meaning you have to grab a grant before you start that project, before you start incurring costs and get approved for it in order to get that money. Tax credits, on the other hand, are an entitlement, as Aria has shared, and they're retroactive, meaning that you already have spent the money and you're going to get some sort of benefit back, whether it's a tax credit or a tax break or cash back in some cases. So you want to think about the right funding mechanisms, even within this non-dilutive funding mix. And it will also help you capitalize on momentum between some of those funding cycles. And easiest always to get money when you don't need it. The same is true as it relates to non-dilutive funding. So if you have just been awarded something substantial, you may consider leveraging either a grant or tax credit-based lender to help you have more of a bridge, or at least access to more of a bridge once you've had that win. And many traditional banks are now also lending against things like your SR&ED credits and receivables. So it's a great strategy for you to just extend your runway and give you more of a buffer. This data was all pulled from one moment in time, not all of it, but a lot of the data that you're seeing is showing you what happened at one moment in time. On one day in November of 2024, what would it have looked like? And that's what we're showing you. So the data shows you at one moment in time. This is all of what's available to you, and it does change every day, often many times throughout the day. It's incredibly fluid. Aria has a word for it. Aria, what's your word for it again? Ephemeral?
Ephemeral, yeah.
Ephemeral. She calls them ephemeral. She calls funding ephemeral, and she's not wrong. They come, they go, and they change very, very fluidly. So in November of 2024, when we pulled all of this data, 88 loan programs were available worth over $219 million to any one recipient of all 88 of those loans. So that's not the full pool of funds available for those 88 loans. That is what can be awarded to one company should it be eligible for all of them. To be clear, no one company is ever eligible for all 88. So no one company will get 219 million, but that's just the way to think about it. And I see some of those questions in the chat, so we'll address them again, but just to help provide that lens when we're saying some of these numbers. But oftentimes these loans have super favorable terms, 0% interest rates. They have forgivable components where you won't repay part of it. We saw a lot of that come up during COVID, but it hasn't gone away. There's many programs in specific sectors, whether it's around targeted and focused capital expenditures or research and development innovation, that the government is taking a very similar approach to. So what we see is that our most successful clients, the most successful businesses in this space, are strategically using a combination of loans, of grants, of tax credits, of incentives that might just reimburse your legal bills, for goodness sake, but they're still fantastic. Second tip for you, don't overlook the quick win programs. Those small awards add up quickly. And so often people are not excited about the $10,000 grant or the $7,000 student hiring grant. And we see that of companies at the idea stage all the way up to large organizations. And what I can tell you is that an incredibly well-known technology company, Microsoft, was at one point one of the biggest awardees of the student funding in Canada. So large organizations are absolutely using this funding also because it is valuable. If you are not spending $7,000 out of pocket to pay wages, you're getting that covered by the government. That means you've got $7,000 you can spend on something else. So it can feel disheartening when you can't find a grant that's going to fund marketing. Everybody wants a grant to fund marketing and give you a Google Ads budget. Our head of marketing, Ryan, would love that. Doesn't exist. Not really. There's maybe one program in a blue moon that's going to give you something oriented around that, or it might be a line item in a much larger program, but they're rare and they're hard to get, and they're often baked into really big programs for later stage companies in very specific goals and or nonprofits. So when you think about it, if you can't get $10,000 or $20,000 for Google ad spend, can you get two of the roles that you plan to hire subsidized by grants, which means that you're now 10, 20, $14,000 richer to spend on that Google ad spend. So it's part of the framing of how you think about it. And also it adds up fast. In our earliest days of Pocketed, hiring grants were our bread and butter. It's how we built this business. We had a literally 100% success rate with our clients, helping them win student and youth hiring grants. There's so much money. It's dried up a lot since COVID. There was a heyday. I think we're going to see that coming back with how high youth unemployment is right now in this country from an economic stimulus and job creation standpoint. But Aria will talk more about that forward-looking piece. But definitely don't overlook the small programs. They are 100% worth your time. And often the effort is commensurate with the value, meaning that you're going to put way less time and energy into that application than you are when you're pursuing the multi-million-dollar program down the road. So great for quicker wins. They can give you that injection of hope that you needed, and they also give you runway. So very valuable. Break plans into fundable phases. We're entrepreneurs, we're business owners, we're visionary and creative, and we're thinking big picture, and we want to be chasing that big win, and that matters. But when you're thinking about the big outcome that you want to achieve, you need to help the government fund you by breaking it into smaller, fundable phases. And that can be based on a combination of things: milestones and timing of when you're going to achieve those milestones. Things that you're investing in, fundable activities. Are you having to hire people to achieve that specific milestone? Are you having to innovate and develop new processes or technology or any other sort of R&D? What is it that you're investing in to achieve those milestones? So when you are growing, think about the smaller pieces and don't exclusively focus on programs that will fund the whole. They're so rare. And the government loves to see you asking not for how much you want in a blue sky dream world or the maximum amount of the program, but they want to see that you're being realistic and have thought through in a disciplined way what it's actually going to cost you to accomplish that milestone. So that budgeting piece is really important, and breaking this into fundable pieces can help you be more successful. It might mean that you're pursuing 5 programs or even 10 programs ultimately over the course of 5 years instead of 1, but it also gives you 10 more chances to be successful than one, swinging for the stars, you shoot, swing and you miss. I don't know. I'm not really that into sports. My toddler is, so I'm learning some of it, but go with me on the analogy here. Give yourself more chances. Give yourself more chances, and finding these fundable bite-sized pieces can help you do that. Because you might not be able to find $10 million, but you might find 500 grand or $1 million or $3 million in different places. And obviously those numbers are big. If your idea stage, sometimes 5 grand makes the difference. It certainly has for us at many stages in our growth journey. So we want to think about that. Definitely, Aria shared there's fundable industries that are, have and have not. She also showed you the breakdown of funding by fundable categories. So, we know that commercialization and capital expenditures are often well-funded categories. So is research and development. There's lots of programs available for hiring and training, but a commensurately smaller dollar value. So again, we want to think about how does our strategy and the thing that we want to build and the spend that we need to invest in to get to that end goal, how does that then translate into what the government is funding, the activities they're funding? And when you're able to nail down the activities that you're spending money on or need to spend money on to achieve your goals, that is when you will have much higher success with grants. And that's where our grant specialists really are experts. So if you're not totally sure how to do that on your own, we've got resources. Ryan can drop a link to our funding strategy roadmap tool that we have that will help you think that through. And or if you want help with a person, you can always purchase time with our team. We don't do that for free, folks. We can't, but we do often help companies through consulting. Fourth tip, look beyond industry boundaries to find overlapping priorities. So what the heck does that combination of big words mean? Well, what we mean by this is if you're in the agriculture sector, don't exclusively look at grants that are targeted at agriculture because you will limit yourself to a much smaller pool of funding. And we know that the majority of programs in Canada are somewhat agnostic to industry. They're also somewhat agnostic to geography. 35% of programs open in this country at any given time are available regardless of your location. Yes, there are some provincial pots of money, and we can show you the breakdown for anyone that's interested. There are some provinces have way more than others. We can show you that composition, but you want to think about those cross-boundary priorities. What can fund that fundable activity? So you're an agriculture company. Let's use that example. But if you know that you need to hire people, you should be looking at wage subsidies, regardless of the industries that they target. You want to be maximizing all the money for you and ag, but you should also be looking at everything else. The same is true for founders from different demographics. We get asked that question a lot. I'm a woman entrepreneur, so I'll use this example. We often hear the question, what money is available for women entrepreneurs? And the answer is less than 1% of grants in Canada are just for women entrepreneurs. So think differently, reframe it into what are all of the opportunities that you have access to, and women, anyone here, you have access to 100% of those opportunities, not just the 1% that are for women. So go after all of it. Don't limit yourself to just what is obvious and stated for your industry. Focus on the priorities, focus on the investment that you're making in those fundable activities, and that reframe will unlock massive new potential for you. Don't ignore the data. Use it to improve your success with non-dilutive funding. We've shared some figures today. We've shared some data today. All of that is available to you in this ebook. Ryan will drop a link to the chat into the chat as well. But this will show you all of what we've learned, give you way more than we're covering today in terms of data and background and what it means, and also actionable tips for you looking forward. We want you to be successful. And for the first time ever, we're showing and tipping our cards at some of the things that we know, things that we use to help our clients be more successful with grants than the average. Okay, so let's look at a few of these in practice. I'm going to tell you about a company. This is an Ontario-based business with 3 co-founders, and they were producing a line of natural beverages. They had just landed their first order from Costco, which, as anyone in the CPG space knows, it's a huge win. As a consumer, I know that's a huge win. And they were actively developing new product lines. They were absolutely generating revenue, but they had bigger ambition than they had resources to deliver on that ambition. So it was a perfect time for them to be looking at grants. They knew they needed more people resources. They needed more capacity manufacturing-wise. They needed new inputs so they could continue to experiment and innovate on their actual formulas. And they had way more that they needed to be funding. So since then, this company, a manufacturing company of beverages, has been awarded over $125,000 in funding. And one of my favorite parts about that, this shows you that cross-boundary priority alignment piece. They didn't just look at manufacturing grants. They didn't just look at CPG grants. One of the grants they got, one of their bigger grants, was $53,000 from an agriculture grant in Ontario because they were using Ontario-based agriculture inputs. They're not an ag company, but they were able to get funding from a grant that was labeled as an ag grant because they were using those inputs into their products. They also have hired over a dozen funded and subsidized people. So 12 different interns joined their team, 4 of whom then became long-term hires, and all of them were subsidized. So that's massive when you're having to pay payroll every 2 weeks. And that hasn't given you sweat at some point in your entrepreneurial journey. My hat is off to you. Please teach me your ways. And then also over $20,000 in export funding. So they have been very successful in getting different types of capital to help them on their journey. And it doesn't stop there. They're already looking ahead at 2025. How can we capitalize again on export funding? It helped us expand outside of Canada. How can we get more of that? And it's definitely the season. We know for sure things like Can Export are coming back. It was announced yesterday that it's for sure coming back. This is your time. That is a program that we 100% know from the data you will be more successful with if you submit the day or within a few days of that portal opening. You want to. Those companies got awarded faster and they got bigger awards. So you want to move fast. Another example for you is a company that is an awesome BC-based upcycling manufacturing company. Holy smokes, they've done incredible things and they continue to grow internationally. So they are in a sweet spot. They're in manufacturing, they're in clean technology, they do a lot of R&D and innovation, they create a ton of jobs, they're expanding rapidly, they're growing, and we've helped them pursue funding in literally every major category, every single one. And they have a huge wins, particularly in hiring and market expansion projects. They're also in diligence around a really competitive 0% government loan that would give them $3 million in funding. And that's, a big opportunity for any company that's looking to invest in new capital expenditure and expand operations to have that type of buffer on a loan that's not repayable and has no interest for such a long period of time. And we've also helped them with pursuing funding outside of Canada. So international agencies, because they operate globally, pursuing RFPs in Asia, and just helping them pursue funding outside of Canada as well. And that's been a really, 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 really exciting company to work with as they've continued to grow. And they're masters with our team at adapting their story. And that is a big part of it. They look creatively at opportunities. They're focusing in on those fundable activities, and they're adapting their story to position themselves competitively for different types of funding. Aria, do you want to talk about some of our own predictions that are predictions,
Yes.
folks? They are our personal predictions.
So
Big
take that,
asterisk.
yeah. Exactly. So with that asterisk of our predictions on the landscape, first of all, we don't think it's all bad news. We think there's a high likelihood that many great programs are coming back and will be refunded. That said, buy Canadian. Lots of entrepreneurs here to buy from, support each other for sure. But these are the kind of the major buckets of funding, and we're going to talk about our predictions for each one. First is hiring. We're seeing a huge amount of youth unemployment right now, and it's almost at 15% unemployment at youth. And so, kind of with that, almost crises and very likely more pressure coming to Canadian jobs, we anticipate we'll see more funding for hiring grants. Youth in Canada are defined as 30 or under, so we're not talking. 30 can be a very experienced hire. So really keep that in mind when you're looking at youth funding. Research and development, as Canada continues to, really become and grow as an innovation hub, the government has committed more and more dollars to research and development. The SR&ED program, that is a tax credit, it's been around, I think, since the 40s, is even better than ever. And so there is an enhanced refundable tax credit. It's cash back, or you can put it towards next year's taxes, your choice. We personally pick the cash because, cash in hand is always nice for a small and growing business. So it's actually increased from the limit being 3 million to 4.5 million. And you can now claim capital investments related to R&D. And so that hasn't been true for a very long time. A massive push here to increase infrastructure and encourage people to buy the equipment that they really need for their R&D. It's also open to more people, more companies. And so before you had to be incorporated, and they've actually opened that category to other business structures. So if you weren't eligible in the past, you may be today. It's definitely worth looking at. Training, we don't anticipate more of a push than we've already seen with the AI stuff in the past year. Sustainability, absolutely. We know that there are new and expanded ITCs, or industrial tax credit, innovation tax credits. So they are everything from carbon CO2 emissions, clean technologies, hydrogen and ammonia production, and investment in really manufacturing in a greener way and extracting critical minerals that we have a lot of here in Canada in a more sustainable way. Capital expenditures, again, if they're related to R&D, this starts to kind of be an interplay between research and development and capital expenditures. Not a coincidence that they're stacked here in this image. And we're also seeing more debt-based programs that are targeting capital expenditures to just make it more possible for your business to do so. Market expansion, one of Canada's most popular programs that Brianna just mentioned, Can Export, has announced yesterday that they are coming back for 2025. And we think that this year there will be an emphasis on trade beyond the US border. So keep that in mind. We anticipate that to open fairly soon. So if you are interested in pursuing that, we encourage you to get in touch, because as Brianna said, getting in early definitely increases your chance of success with this grant and many others. The other thing we want to really state here is grants are not a funding strategy. They're part of a funding strategy. And so we look at it as these are all the different ways at a high level that you can fund your business. So by bootstrapping, Brianna and I have both done that, and there are some clear advantages to that. Yes, you grow
Mhm.
slower, you grow more organically, um, but there's, in a lot of ways, a lot lower risk. So you maintain control and you learn with the market in direct contact with the market. So there's a huge advantage to bootstrapping. Equity, that's where you give up equity shares in your company in exchange for money. This is well talked about in the startup ecosystem, but it's definitely a good way to fund. Pocketed has done some of that ourselves. Debt financing, of course, grants, tax credits, and incentives. See, it's an important piece here. But of course, to really build a strong and sustainable business, you got to have revenue. And so that's ultimately, got to be part of your financing strategy uh, sooner rather
Gotta
than
make
later.
money.
You've got to
You
make
have to
money.
make
Yeah,
money.
exactly. Absolutely.
Yeah, for sure. Thanks, Aria. So we started by saying, in times of uncertainty and of chaos, one of our biggest focuses with our own team is talking about what we can control, because there's so much going on that we have no control over. So we want to share with you a few things that you can control. And these are really tactical items. So include grants in your funding strategy from day one. That should be obvious. You should be looking at grants. They do take time. It does take effort. You need to put in the time. Just looking at them isn't going to do anything for you. You have to learn how to think about grants. You have to learn how to be creative and critical about which opportunities to pursue. And again, that funding roadmap strategy tool that we have, totally free, can help you do that. You can also work with our team if that feels a little bit out of reach for you, or if you just decide it's not worth the opportunity cost of your time and you want an expert. But you have to think about it. You also have to have a dedicated grants champion. We know from our data, the companies that we work with that have a dedicated grants champion are more than twice as successful as it relates to grants. They win more and they win bigger awards. It doesn't have to be somebody whose only job is grants. For us, it's still me and Aria. It's still us that own grants at Pocketed for Pocketed. And for many of you, depending on where you're at in your journey, that might be true for you as well. Start with you, start with the founder, start with the owner, start with the entrepreneur. Stay organized so that you can apply early. Aria's talked about that. You're probably all sick of hearing it. But if you do not apply early in an intake, you will absolutely have dramatically less success in your applications. Dramatically. Apply early in the intake. Do not wait for the deadline. Do not wait for the deadline. Leverage experts. If your option is to hire someone to do it for you or not do it at all, consider hiring someone to do it for you. They will help you assess whether or not you have a competitive chance, because they don't want to work for you if you're not going to be competitive in winning it, particularly if you're working with them on a success basis. Increasingly, we're seeing programs prohibiting success fees. The government doesn't like it. So we're seeing a prohibit on success fees. So over and over, we're seeing a shift to upfront fees and project fees. You're paying for a service. When you do that, you also know that the partner that you're working with wants you to be successful and you're aligning interests. Build relationships of funders and seek feedback. This goes hand in hand with bullet 3 in a way. Oftentimes, funders will come to companies they know that they think are a fit for a program before they even announce that program publicly. That's a huge opportunity for you. Build relationships of funders and ask for feedback when you're not successful. Ask for feedback before you submit. Many times they will look at it and help you adjust your application to increase your chances of success. But that starts with building relationships, much like it does with any investor, banker, whoever it is. And then don't just think about how grants can fund you. This is particularly relevant for anyone here today that's maybe earlier stage. I don't want you to feel disheartened. Grants can also fund your customers. And while that isn't going to directly benefit you in the sense of a government check hitting your bank account, I would argue it's going to benefit you more because it can benefit you in the form of revenue. When you help your clients get funding for a project that they're going to do with you, you've differentiated yourself. You've positioned yourself as a value add partner. You've unlocked capital for them to subsidize the work that they need to do with you anyway. There's nothing better. A couple of great examples of that. One is training. If you are somebody that provides any sort of training that companies buy for their employees, training grants are something you should be looking at. And we partner with trainers all the time on that. So it's a great opportunity for you to get things closed faster when they're in your sales pipeline, charge more for those training programs, and say to them, if you're in BC, for example, 80% of this cost will be covered by a grant, and I'm going to help you get it. That's huge. No one else is doing that. They're not doing that for them. Another great example is an architecture firm in the mass timber sector. They look at grants, sure, for themselves, but more importantly, for their First Nations, Indigenous, and nonprofit clients to be able to capitalize on grants that help them build sustainable housing, for example, or affordable housing using mass timber products. So there's so many ways to think about grants that allow you to weave innovation into your projects that will give you that risk buffer, will help you get to a faster yes. And that is a great way, even when you're an early stage company, to be thinking about grants. And finally, when should I be looking at grants? So this is a rough timeline for you. You will see this also broken out in our ebook that Ryan's dropped the link for already in the chat. But in January and February, you should be scouting for programs. It tends to be some programs, like there's been a big push of ag programs that opened and closed in 10 days already this year. A big push. There's a few open here in BC right now that are closing Feb 10th. They've had their deadlines extended. I think they got feedback that they weren't super attainable timelines. But you want to be looking for grants in January and February so that you're planning ahead. I would actually start earlier, personally. By April, you're applying heavily because you've already seen that spike of when programs are opening. We know that they open aligned with the new government fiscal. May to August, you want to build momentum. September, you're all friggin' in. And then December, it's all about keeping it up. So if I'm in your shoes toward the end of the calendar year, aligned with your own planning, I'm looking at grants again. I would shift that January and February activity earlier in the year if you can. And Pocketed helps to simplify the process. Our software makes it easy for businesses of all sizes to access grants, tax credits, and incentives at your own discretion. It is a tool. It's not going to do it for you. It's a tool for you to use to do it for your business. If you are somebody who doesn't want to do it for yourself, you don't have time, you don't feel like you understand it, you don't want to do it for any number of reasons, that's okay. We have an entire component of our business that is dedicated to services and solutions that help you end to end, white glove with people. But you've got to be willing to pay for it because we don't work for free, just like we would never ask you to work for free. Software, you will get for free. And we'll share more about that shortly. For anyone that is listening to us today and has curiosity about these market expansion programs, yes, CanExpert is the big one. There are others. We are hosting a webinar in 2 weeks, February 18th. You can use this QR code. Ryan will also drop the link into the chat so that you can register for this webinar. And it's going to be all about market expansion funding, some of the things that we learned in this last intake, what we saw, what we observed, trends, things you need to be aware of if you're pursuing this funding, some of our own predictions, and also how you can be more successful in pursuing that funding. We are going to get into questions. So while we're doing that, I'll put this up on the screen. If you use the code INTHEKNOW25, it will get you a free Pocketed Basic account. So please, if you are new to Pocketed, use it. That QR code will automatically apply the code for you. If you already have an account, but you don't have access to it because you don't have an active subscription, you can still add this to your account. Reach out to our support team. Aria can drop the email on the chat, hello@hellopocketed.io, and they can walk you through how to do that if you can't figure it out on your own. Now we're going to get to questions because we've got a whole lot of them and we're going to try to get through as many as we can. We will not get to anything that is in the chat, folks, because there are way too many questions here in the Q&A. So we're going to try to get through as many as we can. We may try to group them where possible. So if we don't directly answer your question, please know that it's not because we didn't want to. We're just trying to group them so we can get through as many themes as possible. So Aria, one of the first questions we got was about the data that we collect. Do you want to talk a little bit about the data that we collect on industries? There's also some questions there around, do we have a sense of when programs are going to come back? If they're going to come back, maybe talk a little bit about what we know of historical open dates and some of the new things that we're doing internally at Pocketed around that.
Yeah, for sure. So yes, we do collect data across all types of industries. Absolutely. And then we have been tracking open and close dates for years now. And so one of the things that we're just launching internally, to Brianna's point, is that, you know, now we're showing our team internally historical open dates and historical close dates. That does not mean that, you know, they will open on that date again or that they'll reopen at all, but it gives us a pretty good idea because, again, past behavior is a great predictor of future behavior. So yes, come talk to us. It's, you know, we might be able to help.
Yeah, if you have specific questions about a specific program, well, you feel welcome to shoot our team an email. If they're able to quickly answer, they will. That's the kind of thing that's pretty specific and we may need to do in a consulting session. Yeah. I'm seeing lots of questions about nonprofits. So some of the themes I'm seeing around nonprofits are, do we have advice for nonprofits? Do we support nonprofits? Can we work with nonprofits? Different questions around that. And the answer is absolutely. We do work with nonprofits extensively. And if you have questions, for those of you that did ask, please feel welcome to reach out to our team. We work with nonprofits. Our database is optimized for for-profit companies by design. However, we work with many nonprofits in largely consulting relationships. So they tend to be on retainers. And if you are interested, I encourage you to reach out to our team and they'll share more with you about how we can support. I'm looking here, Aria, lots of questions around, we've got a question on IRAP. This person was applied for IRAP and was told that it was most likely be approved if they were in another province, but not in BC. Do you want to talk a little bit about some of what we know about IRAP that might help people reframe it?
For sure. So IRAP, to get accepted into IRAP or qualify for IRAP, it does change not only your province, but the region of the province that you live in. And there is no lookup table. So you're doing the right thing where you give them a call and they go through their software and then they tell you at the end of the call whether or not you can join them. That is the time to ask them, what would make me eligible? Because they'll often at that point be able to tell you, but there's really no other way. So keep calling and asking those questions. But outside of moving, the corporate head of your company, you really are kind of at the mercy of the criteria in your area. It's a great program. You build a relationship with your industrial technology advisor. You tell them what you're going to do. You go do it and you show them, and they will have opportunities and support for you. We're big fans of IRAP.
Yeah, absolutely. Seeing a question of somebody asking, how can I know when grants open?
Oh, great question. Use the platform. That's what we built it for. You can go in and heart any grant. And if you heart a grant in there, you like it, you'll get emails actually about when it opens and closes. You can also sign up for weekly, monthly, or not at all newsletters that will do kind of the same. And of course, you can keep checking the platform anytime you want. It is always up and available and has that open information there.
Yeah, so you can turn on notifications, but I also encourage you to make looking at Pocketed part of your workflow. It should be something that you're doing on a weekly basis. Get familiar with grants. And if you're not in there, then you will miss things. It's that simple. It's why we only offer annual subscriptions to Pocketed, because we know that very few companies, if any, will be successful in finding and being awarded a grant in 1 month. It just takes longer for you to get your stuff together, to get it applied, for it to be reviewed by the program, et cetera. Some more questions around, are there promo codes if they want to sign up? Absolutely. The code is here on the screen. Please, that will get you free access to our software platform. And there was a few questions around that. So please use that code and you can get access. Some people are asking questions very specific to their business. So folks, if you had a question in the chat, in the Q&A that was about your own business and grants for you, please reach out to us, hello@hellopocketed.io. Your best bet's going to be to either join our office hours, which we host twice a week, and they're totally free, they're community, and you can ask some questions there, and or to book a paid consult. So that's time where you get one-on-one time with a grant specialist. And outside of that, we encourage you to look at the platform. If you're just not ready to pay, that's totally fine. Look at the platform, use our free resources. We've given you so much to hopefully be successful on your own. Yeah. No, we're not sharing the deck, folks, but we will share a recording. R&D, Aria, can you talk about Shred? There's several questions. I'm just going to fly them all at you. Yeah. One question is the R&D tax credit cash back to the company? Maybe talk about when it is.
Yes, it is. So if you have spent money on personnel or now capital expenditures for R&D, you'll get anywhere from 30 to 55% of that spend back. It's complicated math. This is why we totally recommend working with a Shred writer. There's overhead calculations, but it's actually cash back into your business, or you can choose to put that onto next year's tax bill, whatever is more advantageous to you. Most people choose cash in their pocket.
Yes. Some other questions regarding R&D now qualifying for capital expenditures. Can that include qualitative research initiatives as opposed to, say, hardcore lab studies? It's probably a question that we need to answer offline, but you want to take a stab at it?
In general, any type of R&D that is true R&D does qualify. They don't like sociology or political R&D. So those have been areas that very clearly are called out on their website as not being fundable, but otherwise we need to know more details to tell you the answer for sure, but quite possibly.
Aria, do you want to maybe quickly give a rundown of, like, in 2 sentences, what is Shred and who is eligible for it? There's several questions around it.
Yeah. Anyone who is
what is it? Start there.
What is it? It's a tax credit program that gives you cash back or tax money back at the end of your fiscal year. You file SHRED when you file your taxes. So it's a tax credit. It's an entitlement. You are entitled to that cash if you meet the eligibility. To be eligible, you must be a Canadian controlled business. It used to be corporation. That's no longer true. You can be anywhere in Canada. The work that is fundable must be done in Canada. They do not have to be a Canadian citizen, but they do have to be legally entitled to work in Canada, and they have to sit in Canada while they do that work. So I see some questions about that. If you offshore that work, unfortunately, it is not eligible. Same with wage subsidies. You cannot use Canadian wage subsidies to fund jobs in other countries. They need to be in Canada.
You generally have to be domestic employees. They have to be Canadian permanent resident, citizen, refugee.
That is absolutely true. For SHRED, they don't have to be. They can be on a working visa. That's okay, as long as they're working in the country. It doesn't matter the nature of your business. It matters the nature of the activities. So I'm seeing some questions around that as well. So you can be a professional consulting company, but if you are doing R&D in order to support your clients, that portion of your business is eligible for sure.
I'm going to answer some questions I see around hiring grants. So there's some common themes. One of them is, are there grants to fund wages for a founder? And the answer is almost irreversibly no. The exception is actually SHRED. So it's not going to give you a grant, but founders are eligible to claim part of your wages through SHRED as long as you're participating in relevant activities, eligible activities. If anyone isn't sure about SHRED and you know that you're spending money on research, development, innovation, things that have a risk of failing, then please feel welcome to reach out to our team and we can help you assess whether or not you might be eligible to pursue SHRED and if it's worth having some conversations around that. In order to be an employee, they have to be on payroll. Lots of questions around that. You cannot pay someone as a contractor. You cannot send them some sort of e-transfer and not be remitting taxes to the government for that person in order for them to be considered an employee. Generally speaking, most wage subsidies will only fund new hires. They will not fund existing employees. The exception to that is if an existing employee goes back to an eligible post-secondary program and meets the eligibility requirements of student hiring grants, you can fund existing employees on student wage subsidies. We've done that very successfully ourselves. So that is the one exception. I'm just looking here. So that was a lot of the questions are about that.
Yeah, for sure.
Our wage subsidies, no, that's for that as well.
Some grants do let you do fractional or part-time work. Not all of them. They are often looking for full-time work. And in terms of, can you use SHRED for contractors? The answer is actually yes, at a lower percentage.
Yeah, for sure. A few questions about how people can work with Pocketed. So I'll answer those. We'll keep going as long as we can, folks, until Ryan tells us we need to stop. But in terms of how to work with Pocketed, so the rates to work with Pocketed differ. When we're doing consulting with you, you can ballpark that at around $350 an hour is the standard of where we're going to do consulting with you. In terms of grant applications, we generally price those on a per grant basis. For example, to do a student hiring grant with Pocketed is $1,000. They are done on a success fee basis, meaning you only pay if you are successful, but we do them on a flat fee of $1,000. Other programs really depend on the program. Some we cannot offer you on a success fee basis because the funder prohibits it, and your application will be disqualified if they find out that you did work with us on a success fee basis. So really it does depend. We try to make it accessible. So some of those rates, like $350 an hour, doesn't feel very accessible. Very few organizations are working with us on an hourly basis. For the most part, we're doing project-based work so that we help to lessen that burden for you. So if you do have specific programs that you want to pursue, that's when it makes sense to approach us about hiring a grant writer. If you're looking to have somebody help you identify what programs you should pursue, what programs could be a fit for your business, that is when you want to consider booking a consultation. You can do that directly from the platform. It's going to take payment, et cetera, in an automated way. And as a result of that consultation, you'll receive a funding report with your curated recommendations. I'm also seeing lots of questions around Pocketed Concierge. Pocketed Concierge is something that we only allow a very specific profile of company to access. So we exclusively offer that product to highly eligible companies. And there has to be a big investment in fundable activities happening in your business for that program to make sense and add the right value for you and for it to make sense on our side. So it's something that we do offer to companies in innovation. For example, you have to be well capitalized. It can be money that you've raised, or it can be dollars that you generate in revenue, but it's not the right program for idea stage founders. It's for companies as they're further up on their growth curve. In terms of to be very clear, with the code that we have on the screen, you can use our software totally free, which means that you can use Pocketed to find programs and apply on your own and never pay us a penny. You can get as many dollars as you want and never pay us a penny. So there are lots of ways to work with Pocketed that aren't going to cost you anything. We want it to be accessible. We've been in your shoes as early stage founders, as small business owners. So we want to make sure that it is accessible to everybody. Our services are where there are fees required. I'm looking here at a few more questions. Farzan, I'm going to encourage you to reach out to us directly for your question about MyTax and Shred. There is some nuance around MyTax and Shred and how they interact that you're going to want to have a conversation about. If you are receiving MyTax, you're likely eligible for Shred. It's a great indicator. So you want to make sure it's on your strategy. So reach out to our team. Question about some industries are not easy to get grants. Very true. Not all industries are created equally. Aria showed you the top 10 already. It's really not about your industry. The government doesn't really care. Sometimes they care, but for the most part, they don't. It's about, for this anonymous asker, I would encourage you to think about how you spend money. What are you spending money on to build your business? Are you hiring new employees? Are you training people? Are you building out a space? Are you investing in research and development in some way? Think about the fundable activities. You would hugely benefit from downloading that free funding strategy roadmap guide. I think that'll really help you reframe that around fundable activities. I also saw someone asking, what's a grant champion and what's a funding strategy? Awesome questions. A grant champion is someone who has it as part of their role that they are responsible for being on top of grants, that funding the business in some way is part of their job. It's a KPI for them. We know that that hugely increases success rates for companies because somebody actually has to do it. Otherwise, nobody's doing it. If it's everyone's responsibility, it's nobody's responsibility. And then, so often it's the founder, was the example that I shared. Sometimes it's finance or accounting or HR in bigger companies. In terms of a funding strategy, that is starting to think about your business in context of fundable activities. So it's helping you break down what are the projects that I'm investing in, when am I investing in them, what am I spending money on to help achieve that goal. It's going to help you think through all of those pieces that then you can link to which grants would be relevant for those activities and those projects and those initiatives. So Sandra, it's going to help you build out your funding strategy, and that's that roadmap tool that Ryan has shared in the chat. I am looking here. Oh, Aria, a question around consortiums. So lots of big programs, folks, require you to have partnerships, whether it's a nonprofit, for-profit partner, an academic partner. Aria's been very successful with this herself in her own building journey. So Aria, you want to maybe talk a little bit about how somebody, what are some best practices or tips in approaching grants through partnerships?
Yeah, absolutely. So many of the superclusters who are big funding bodies in Canada do require consortia. Often they actually require the large companies to have an SME within their consortia. Great news for most people on this call. Best practices are build relationships early. So if you call a big company 3 weeks before a grant is due, the chance of them partnering with you is slim to none. Most of those relationships take about a year to really develop, to get to know each other and trust each other, to, invest and work together in a really deep way, in a public way. So those big grants are also very public. And so big companies want to know for sure that they're working with great partners. So if you're thinking about that, you really want to start introducing yourself, talking to, and possibly even working on small pilot projects or really coming up with ideas as soon as possible, looking to really apply to things 6, 9, 12 to 18 months in the future with those big partners.
Yeah, absolutely. Thanks, Aria. Some people asking questions around how long do grants take? And all over the map. They're all over the map. So some take 30 days, some take 14 days, some are going to take 6 months, we're seeing some take 18 months. So it really does depend on the program, the size of the program, et cetera. There's a lot of variables in there. Smaller grants tend to be faster, rule of thumb. Big grants tend to take longer, but that's not universally true. So there's exceptions to every rule. And in the platform, you'll see what we tell you in terms of your time investment to get that application in. We peg it for you. Is it quick, medium, or long? and then you can see that estimate directly in the platform as well. We do run sessions that are more about some of that data, and I think that's something that we could look at doing just based on some of the interest that I'm seeing. We don't offer promo codes for concierge. Sorry. Can we look at past failed grant applications and provide advice? Absolutely, Megan. We do that a lot when we're working with our clients. When we support our clients with their shred claims, for example, we use the information that we learned from you in that process to help you identify other funding opportunities that could be relevant. And looking at past applications is always a great part of that strategy. I think this person's asking about a really specific use case for their business in Australia with a company in Australia. Congratulations. You're not going to find grants to hire freelancers. So probably reach out to us, but just based on what you described, you won't find funding for that exact use case. So I would encourage you to think about different approaches to that. Reach out to us if you want to, and maybe book a consult so we can walk you through what that looks like. I think we've gotten through as much as we can. I know we're already 5 minutes over time. Thank you to so many of you that stayed late with us. It was great to have all of you with us. You will receive a copy of the recording, and we will also be sending out resources, the links that were shared today. We won't share the chat in full, but we will share as many of the links as we can. Thank you so much, everybody.
Thank you.